This week on Houston Newsmakers, the hurricane season is here. Are you ready? We've already had our third named storm this year. What does that mean for the season ahead? What should you be planning now while you have time? KPRC Chief Meteorologist Frank Billingsley is here to help fill in the blanks. Juneteenth is next Sunday. We'll look at the significance of Houston's Freedmen's Town as a part of that celebration and the challenge of keeping that legacy alive. And NASA's next big deal. We'll talk to some of the men and women behind what's next and how NASA research continues to provide positive impact for all of us here on Earth.
From KPRC Channel 2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Khambrel Marshall.
You know, last week, Tropical Storm Colin formed in the Gulf and whipped across the Florida Peninsula and the East Coast. Not a strong tropical storm, but the second named storm this season, third of the year, and what is a reminder that we all should have a plan, prepared and ready to put into action if Southeast Texas is hit by a storm in the coming months. Are you ready? What does being ready mean? Here to talk about what all of this means and what may be in store for us this hurricane season, KPRC Chief Meteorologist Frank Billingsley. Good morning, Frank. Thank you for being here. This is good for us because we're always talking in the weather office, but now we get a chance to talk about this. Let's talk about what you think is one of the most important things you stress to people as they get ready for hurricane season.
Well, you know, with all of the social media noise and all of the messaging out there, the one thing to really be cognizant of is the message. If you're in an evacuation zone, which one? If you're told to leave, don't argue. Don't be one of those people that the Coast Guard now has to risk their life to go and rescue. If you're told to leave, if it's mandatory evacuation, leave. Know which way you're going to go. What's your evacuation route? What are you going to take with you? Your prescription medicines, Pampers, your dog food for your dog. You can just say, I'm going to take my dog, but don't forget the dog food, you know, things like that. So have a plan as to what you're going to take if you have to evacuate. If you're not in an evacuation zone, what do you need at home to shelter in place for maybe a week? Do you have enough water? Do you have enough canned goods? Do you have something to open the canned goods with if the electricity is out?
Little simple things.
Little simple things. And then do you have a good supply of tools and cleanup stuff? This is one of the things we really discovered after Ike. No one owned a rake.
Wow.
You know, I mean, how many people, we're not a community where we rake leaves every fall.
Right.
You know, we blow them, but we don't rake them. And so nobody had a rake. And so so that's just that part of getting ready for what if it happens to you.
Well, we know that whether or not it's going to happen to us, it doesn't really matter. I mean, we have the forecasts that are out there. Let's take a look at some of the forecasts that are out there. And this is some of what's being said. NOAA says 10 to 16 named storms, 4 to 8 will be hurricanes, 1 to 4 would be major, and that's category 3, 4, or 5, 111 miles per hour. Colorado State, they're also reputable. They say 14, 6 hurricanes, 2 major. The 30-year average says 12, 6, and 3, which means that the forecast for this year is a little bit less than average. But that really doesn't mean a whole lot, does it?
No, you know, I mean, we always say if one gets you, then you've had a bad year. When 2005 came along and we had technically 28 storms, not one technically hit us, right? I mean, we were scared by Rita, and there was a lot of evacuation issue, but that hit the Sabine Pass area. 28 storms, not one hits us.
Right.
In 1983, 4 storms. Alicia hits us.
Right.
So, I mean, there's the perfect example of you just can't be too careful.
In 1992, by the way, which
Andrew,
was 6 storms, and the first one was Andrew, which is a category 5, one of only 3 we've ever had.
And that's all it took.
Yeah.
So it only takes one. Don't let your guard down regardless. Now, I think that these forecasts for an average year are probably about right. We don't see anything out there like particularly hot water. In 2005, the Gulf was 90 degrees in spots. So we don't see really hot water like that. So we're not expecting a really crazy year in terms of the number of storms. On the other hand, we don't have an El Nino to knock the tops off of storms because it's gone. As of today, the El Nino is gone. It's been with us for the last year and 3 or 4 months.
Right.
So we don't have that to protect us. Pluses and minuses, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but,
no.
But you know, you look at the pluses and minuses for the season. There are about as many pluses for an active season as there are minuses. You get to an average number, and that's where that comes from.
It seems to me one of the minuses is one of the good things about our community is we are growing. It's a great city.
Yes.
But one of the bad things about it as it relates to hurricane season is that since Hurricane Ike has hit, which was in 2008, there's been a whole lot of things have happened since Ike had happened. We saw this storm, we saw the damage, but since then, hundreds of thousands of people have moved into the Houston area.
Arguably 1 million in the last 6 years. I mean, it's hard to say.
Now we're trying to catch them up on education about the hurricane.
Yeah, and you can't just look at population because you say, well, did that many come in? Probably because we have them leaving and coming.
Right.
The ones that left, they've left. They don't need to know this message necessarily, but the ones that have come in, that's where we have to know.
The challenge then is making sure that they know that there's something they need to know in this case, and that is knowing all the things you talked about. One of the things we talked about very briefly the other day, I want to show this. We have a radar loop of Ike, and you can look at that and see a lot of lessons that you can learn from it. And for example, this is the beginning of it.
This is what's coming as it moves. And look at the eye wall, that center. Look how it really shrinks right before it gets to shore. Look at that. Shrink, 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 boom. It went what we call an eye wall replacement, and as a result, it's almost like a tether ball where the ball gets closer to the pole, it gets faster. Same idea. The closer the spin, like when ice skaters pull their arms together to get that spin, that's what's happening, that angular momentum. So you've got to watch the eye wall. You got to know where the center of this is, because the right-hand punch, the northeast quadrant, relative to the way the storm is moving, and in this case, it was Bolivar. That's going to be your most powerful wave action, your strongest winds, your biggest threat of tornadoes. That's where we really got to watch for. Not to say that the rest of it's not bad, but knowing where these storms are and knowing which way they're going, that's one of the key messages. Know the storm. Don't just let somebody say, oh, it's in the Gulf coming this way. Really? Where is it in the Gulf? Which way exactly?
Huge difference was made by the difference where the wall came across.
Well, you saw it turn. I don't know if we can show it again, but you see as it's on its way, it's heading right toward San Luis Pass. Watch this. We're going to start it over. It's heading right toward San Luis Pass. You'll notice at the end here, and I'll tell you when, it's going to turn north. So here it comes. It's coming to San Luis Pass. Here it comes. Here. Look, 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 and boom.
Right up north.
See that turn?
Right.
That made a huge difference. If that had not happened, the west end of Galveston, Jamaica Beach to San Luis Pass would look just like Bolivar looked, which is to say, gone.
So our big message to everybody is to be prepared. Don't be one of those people who say, oh, I got to get my stuff, and the line is going to be long. And there's a couple of ways to do that. There's a lot of stuff on our website, and our app is a wonderful thing, too.
Yeah, we have a great app. It's free. You can download that, the Hurricane Tracker there. That will always be up to date. And then, pretty much in the case of hurricane preparedness, any Googled site is going to have pretty much the same information. So, get the information. What kind of preparations do you need for your particular situation?
I just wanted to put the pretty picture up.
Thank you.
As long as I could. Hurricane Tracker.
Never met a camera I didn't like.
I know. Thank you, Frank. I think I know that by now. Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
Yeah, safe season to everyone.
See you in the weather office.
It's just behind us.
I know. Okay. Thank you, Frank. Hey, next Sunday, it's June 19th, celebrated in the African-American community as Juneteenth. What does that mean, and what is the significance of that date as it's related to Houston's Freedmen's Town and its fight for survival? I'll talk to a strong advocate for that historic community next when Houston Newsmakers continues. And welcome back to Houston Newsmakers, and good morning to Doris Ellis Robinson, who's been spending quite a bit of time devoted to the preservation of an historic area of Houston known as Freedmen's Town in the city's Fourth Ward. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
For those people who may not know anything about Freedmen's Town, when they hear that, what is Freedmen's Town, and what is the significance of it to this community?
Well, when Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, finally Texans got the word. And June 19th, 1865, Texans learned they were free. And they had to find a place to go. And the Freedmen decided to locate on the banks of the Buffalo Bayou so that they could make a home for themselves. And they built up and developed Freedmen's Town as the place for them to live, work, and play.
And it was a thriving community for many years, was it not?
Yes, it was. It was a thriving community. We had our lawyers, doctors, schools, everything that mattered to the African-American community at that time was in Freedmen's Town. All of the churches were there, and so when the people decided to branch out, they all branched out from Freedmen's Town. So if we would look at roots, the roots of the Freedmen are in Freedmanstown.
And I looked at a map of one time of the Freedmanstown territory, and it really covered most of downtown Houston as it exists today.
Yes, it did. And actually where City Hall is, that was part of Freedmanstown. When you look at the old addresses, the businesses that were located were on Milan, on Smith, because that was part of the territory. And it went all the way up to Waugh.
But it has shrunk through the years. A number of things have come into play. The development of downtown, developers,
Yes.
the highway coming through was one of the things.
Yes.
And one of the reasons you really got involved was when you heard that they were planning, that there was a plan in place to take up the bricks in Freedmanstown. What is it so unique about the bricks at Freedmanstown?
Well, the bricks were purchased. First of all, the story is that the citizens of Freedmanstown went to the city council for 6 years requesting to improve their neighborhood. And the city council continued to tell them no. But they continued to go back. They went back and they went back because they were trying to deal with the health issues, malaria, the mosquitoes, the water, it was infested. And so they wanted to improve it. So they learned to make bricks. And they purchased the bricks and the right-of-way so that they could indeed have a chance to improve their area. Finally, after 6 times there, the city said yes. And once they said yes, the freedmen and their descendants laid those bricks so that they could improve their neighborhood.
And now they were planning on taking those bricks up because of more development?
More development, more gentrification that has happened. And I got the call on Juneteenth 2 years ago about what was about to happen. And I don't know what happened.
Now, we had video of you lying down in the bricks there to make sure that they didn't continue to take them up.
Yes.
And that stopped that process for the moment.
That stopped the process for the moment. Yes, it did.
Where are we now in terms of legal action to keep that stopped, or what's the status now?
We sought an injunction, and we've gone to court, and the injunction is still in place. And we are now at the point where hopefully we have a new mayor, and we will have an opportunity to negotiate a reasonable settlement so that the history of the Freedmens can be preserved.
And what is reasonable? Because that's a relative term as it relates to what's going to be going on with
Well, we only have 7/10 of a mile left. And so we're asking that the city look at a different way of providing the infrastructure to place the sewer and water lines under the sidewalks, opposed to digging up the bricks and not allowing that historical place to remain. You see, not only do we have the historical place with the bricks themselves, the cultural and the religious freedom symbols are there as it relates to those bricks. So those people brought their history and their religious freedom cultures and practices there.
Well, I know you have a lot going on going into the Juneteenth celebration of next week, and this show is airing on Sunday. So going into the next week, a lot of things going on. I want you to know we're going to put all of those celebrations on our website, so everyone can go to click2houston.com.
Thank you.
And we'll provide the information for all the Juneteenth celebrations, because there's plenty going on. And I know that the best outcome is there a timetable associated with what you might be able to expect out of this?
Well, for the bricks, once we meet with the mayor has told me that he's going to call a meeting, and once he calls that meeting, we are ready to have a major conversation about preservation in Houston.
I mean, you keep us up to date on that. We want to keep track on all of that sort of thing.
Because it's a tourism opportunity.
Absolutely, for everybody.
Yeah.
Conversation continues. You keep us up to date, and we'll follow along as well.
Thank you so much.
Doris, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
You should have come by sooner. Coming up, movers and shakers at NASA. The agency prepares for its next big adventure, the mission to Mars, and more. That's next on Houston Newsmakers.
From KPRC Channel 2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Khambrel Marshall.
And welcome back to Houston Newsmakers. We are blessed in Southeast Texas to be the home base of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration's Johnson Space Center. Since 1961, what was formerly the Manned Space Center and later the Johnson Space Center has been the home of NASA's Mission Control. It's a major component of our community. And since the shuttle program was shuttered, folks at NASA have been working to stay focused on deep space exploration. I recently had the chance to talk about what's next for NASA with Dr. John Charles, the Chief Scientist of the NASA Human Research Program, Dr. Camille Aline of the ISS Program Science Office, and astronaut MD Thomas Marshburn. Here's a part of that conversation. What's the challenge in getting to Mars as compared to what was going on earlier in the space program?
Well, the challenge getting to Mars is the fact that it's further away and it takes a longer time to get there, and that if you're sending astronauts, that exposes astronauts to the risks of spaceflight for far longer than the trip to the moon. The trip to the moon in Apollo was 3 days, more or less, to get there, 3 days to get back, and a few days in orbit around the moon or on the surface. We're talking about sending astronauts to Mars on trips that might take 6 or even 8 months just to get there, and they have to be in great condition when they arrive so they can work as hard as they've ever worked in their lives on the surface to justify the mission, and then for perhaps up to 18 months, then another 6-month trip back to the Earth just to get back to home and hearth.
And I've always been amazed when I'm watching launches and going on the website how meticulous things are at NASA. You are very meticulous across the board, which you have to be. At what point do you decide to kind of say, well, okay, we're just going to have to go? Do you ever get to that point?
We test extensively before we get to that point because we have human lives in our hands. So safety is our #1 priority.
Dr. Marshburn, are you interested in going to Mars?
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, every astronaut would love to do that, especially, and for the new astronauts, I come back from the ISS and I say it's a wonderful place to live because of the great work we're able to do up there. We're all sort of workaholics, we all like science, and it is just a wonderful place to be, talking to the investigators on the ground. You're seeing new things every single day up there. That, in my mind, improves the living quality of being in space immensely.
I want to go to a video because I find it always exciting that time just before launch, as you described it too as well. For me, it's the same way. This is a launch that we were first looking at back in December 2014. Let's take a few seconds to watch this.
8, 7, 6,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff at dawn, the dawn of Orion, and a new era of American space exploration.
I love that. It just makes me, and I was watching you, Dr. Marshburn, you were smiling. Just
oh, yeah. Just look at that. Oh, absolutely. Wondering what it's like on the inside. Yeah.
Orion, now that was a vehicle that's not going to be the vehicle that's going to take it to Mars, but what's the significance of that particular Mars? What were you trying to test? What was the testing process about Orion and we were trying to look at?
So that was the it was called EFT-1, the Exploration Flight Test 1. And as you said, we were testing the capsule and different subsystems in that capsule, the avionics for one, and the heat shield were the 2 subsystems that we were particularly testing on that flight test.
And more recently, I noticed that the system, the SLS, which is the System Launch, help me out with that.
Space Launch System.
See, I threw you off. Space Launch System, and it was massive. It actually fired, and so the test firing, it was a burn of about 8 minutes or so. What's the significance of that when you're wanting to see, I know as you as an astronaut, Tom, in terms of knowing that your boost is never going to go away?
That's right, yeah. So 8.5 minutes, that's about how long it takes to get up to low Earth orbit, but it's a massive amount of weight, more than we ever tried to get up. So these are big boosters, and some of they're based on a lot of what came from the shuttle, and that's the solid rocket boosters on the shuttle have vibrations I've never felt on any other craft ever. It's just cacophony all around you, all the noise that you feel. It's very exhilarating.
What is it going on now that's involved, that space program's involved in right now, that we on Earth are gaining the benefits from whatever the testing is and process that you're doing?
So a lot of the research has what we call Earth benefits. So particularly in the areas of human health, where we're doing things like growing protein crystals. And protein crystals, we know, are the foundations of the building blocks of life. So we can possibly, by growing crystals in space versus growing them on Earth, be able to grow bigger crystals and identify identify structures of diseases that we may not be able to identify here on Earth. That in itself could lead to candidate treatments for different diseases. And so that is just one area and one example of how the research we're doing in the area of biology it has a benefit to us here on Earth.
Doctor, as you get ready to continue to wait for the next assignment, what do you tell people about the space program, why it's so important and why it should still be supported by all of us?
Well, I usually start off on the long list of more examples of Earth benefits, and I could just keep on going. Eventually, I have to stop and say it is so immense what it has done for not just our country in raising the technical base of our country, but around the world as well. Being a doctor, I'm partial to some of the medical experiments I did up on the space station. One of my favorites was an ultrasound experiment. You know, we have X-ray machines and CAT scans on the ground. Why would we need to explore more about ultrasound? Well, a lot of places on the Earth don't have any kind of diagnostic imaging available to them. Techniques developed by NASA so that astronauts on a remote location like a space station have been the same techniques they've been able to apply to remote locations on the Earth, to include a sports field or a waiting room in a busy inner-city emergency room, which might be an 8-hour wait. That's still kind of remote. So in the regular medical world, they wouldn't. No one's motivated to try to find out what else can ultrasound do. We have to, and we've found out a lot of things that are beneficial to everyone.
You can see the entire interview on Newsmakers Extra this week. Just go to click2houston.com and under the news banner, click on Newsmakers, along with all of the information about this program and previous programs. In this week's information, you'll find a link to the full interview with NASA. Enjoy. Final thoughts about next week and beyond coming up next on Houston Newsmakers. Next week here on Houston Newsmakers, the amazing story of career and recovery resources and the impact it's had on this community and how you can help as well. Always looking for your suggestions for this program, and it's easy to get in contact with me to tell me the subjects or stories you'd like me to take on. Email me at HoustonNewsmakers@click2houston.com. Thank you to my guests for joining me this morning, and of course to all of you for tuning in. To see previous shows or get information on today's show, just go to click2houston.com. Under the news banner, click on Newsmakers. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you back here again next week.